Hello friends, in this video, we'll look at the biblical book of Ecclesiastes from the Old Testament, from chapter 3 verses 1 through 15. In my last video on Ecclesiastes, I explained from chapter 2 verses 18 through 26 regarding the themes of legacy, sleepless nights, and enjoyments from God. Now let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verses 1 through 15. Let me first provide a verse-by-verse explanation before I move to the application part. In verse 1, it says, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." If you look at everything from a completely human perspective, this world only perspective, everything in life might seem very random. Times and seasons may seem random, but the author of Ecclesiastes makes it clear that everything is governed by God, all times and seasons, and nothing happens by chance or randomness, and we should be aware of this. If you look at verses 2 to 8, verses 2 through 8, it describes the times and seasons of life in terms of a list of 14 opposites. A list of 14 opposites. Verses 2 to 8 state, "A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sew, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." This list is more of a general description of life experiences with all its simplicity and complexity intertwined. It is not meant to prescribe that everything listed must be or would be strictly followed and or carried out in the lives of all human beings. For instance, not every human being will be a participant in killing or in literal war. At the same time, there are things and events in this list that are predetermined or predestined by God, which we have absolutely no control over, such as our birth and death. The good, the beautiful, the true, as well as the bad and the ugly in this list come about by the eternal plan and counsel of God's will, whether God actively brings something about or permits it to happen. Another thing to add here is from verse 8. It says, "A time to love and a time to hate." The hate mentioned in verse 8 is just a description of how people behave. It is not suggesting that we as Christians should go about hating people. As I said earlier, this list is not prescribing what Christians should do. It is just a description of things that happen in this world. Although I must also add that there is such a thing as righteous anger, in which we are stirred by the injustices that we see in the world. Verses 9 to 10 say, "What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with." These two verses repeat what has been explored earlier in the previous two chapters. What is the point of working so hard if everything ultimately is futile, vain, or chasing after the wind? Because everything in life is fleeting, passing, and life in itself is fleeting, passing, and would terminate in death. Still, verse 10 gives the positive perspective that God has given us work or created us to be busy with some work in this life. Verse 11 states, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. As per the author, God's creation of everything, including the ordering of all times and seasons, has a beauty or charm to it. Also, God has created in us a desire for eternity, so that we are not completely satisfied with this world, but instead long for more, long for Him. Because God has created eternity in our hearts, we have a sense that God has always existed and that He brought the world into existence. However, we still cannot fully comprehend how God is working from the start to the end because of the way He has ordered all of reality. Verses 12 to 13 state, "I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man." Instead of fighting with God and becoming angry, irritated, and bitter about reality and human limitations, we should change our perspective. It would be better for us to enjoy the God-given daily gifts, such as working, eating, and drinking. Verses 14 to 15 say, "I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before Him. That which is already has been, that which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away." There's a contrast here. God's work, ways, purposes, and design endure forever. We cannot add to them or alter them or take anything from them. Whereas human work, ways, purposes, and design do not last. They are passing, fleeting, and as the recurring theme of Ecclesiastes suggests, a chasing after the wind. The goal of this is to remind us of God's sovereignty and control over all things and to humble us, instilling in us fear and reverence for the God of the universe. Verse 15 indicates that history repeats itself because it follows a pattern set by God's ordering of all things. Furthermore, God holds to account that which is past, long gone, or forgotten. So from Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verses 1 through 15, I have 4 points of application for us in the Christian life. 4 points of application for us from for the Christian life from Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verses 1 through 15. First, we need to understand that God is sovereign over the timing and seasons of life. God is sovereign over the timing and seasons of life. God's timing may not always be our timing. God's timing may not always be our timing. His timetable is different. Because life comes in different seasons, we cannot artificially force, engineer, or manufacture the timing of our lives, especially when we want to escape painful seasons and jump into successful ones. God controls all of this. When we know this, we will be at peace with God, with ourselves, and with others. Second, second point of application, God has given us the good, albeit mundane, gifts of work, food, and drink. We should be deeply grateful to Him for all these daily gifts. For these daily gifts. Third, third point of application for us in the Christian life, not knowing everything about the world, life, and reality should teach us humility before God. It is okay not to know everything. It is okay not to know everything. This in turn should drive us toward seeking a deeper relationship with and greater dependence on God. Fourth, the final point of application for us in the Christian life, we are called to live life in light of eternity. We are called to live life in light of eternity. There is a desire for eternity created within us, and we won't be fully satisfied with only worldly things. Moreover, to look at this light, to look at this through the light of New Testament teachings, this world and everything within it is passing away. This world and everything within it is passing away. However, whoever does the will of God, whoever builds his life on the foundation of God's enduring word and the teachings of Jesus Christ will endure forever, both in this life and in eternity.